Hello, friends. I'm Michael Kingswood. I write fiction for fun and profit. And don't until this week, I hadn't really gotten into political things here on this channel. But since we're talking elections, I decided to break that rule a little bit. So there's this guy Asmongold. I heard the name for a long time, but hadn't really looked at his stuff too much. He does gaming and other things. But since I like gaming and I watch a lot of gaming channels, I had heard of him, but I hadn't really tuned in until the last couple of weeks. And I found myself liking a lot of his content, and I find that he's a pretty insightful guy, kind of funny guy, and has a lot of nuanced views on a lot of things that I enjoyed watching. But he had this thing came out a day or so ago that I think he was a little off base in a couple of things he was talking about regarding the election. And even though I'm a nothing nobody that nobody's heard of outside of my very small literary following, I figured I would talk about that because, yeah, why not? I know what you're thinking, Kingswood. Hey, if you're just trying to, clout chase and gain views because of riding on Asmongold's shoulders. Well, no, but also, yeah. The whole purpose of this channel is to expose people to my literary work so that maybe people will like me and what I'm doing and be interested and go and find my books and buy them and help get me money. But also, I'm not, the biggest genius on earth, but I also read and think and pay attention to the world, and also like to talk to people about matters philosophical and religious and political. I think there's some things that he addressed that possibly he's missing some nuance on, and it's been bothering me. So I feel a need to talk about it a little bit. So I hope that you will indulge me as we go about this. So this is a video that he did about a day ago, and I'm not going to start in the beginning of it. He was addressing some of President-elect Trump's plans going forward, but then he cut into this one clip, these news show, and started talking about a few things that I feel like could use a little. I think he's off the base in a couple things. So let's just go with this and we'll talk it through. So here we go.
I don't think that they want to come to the terms that, like, that's what people voted for.
He's talking about mass deportations here, and yeah, that is what people voted for, mass deportations of illegal immigrants who are, immigrant is not the proper term, right? If you're here illegally, you're not an immigrant. Illegal immigration is to immigration as rape is to sex. Right? The one is consensual the one is non-consensual and a violation, and the other one is welcoming. Right, so if you're here illegally, you can't claim to be an immigrant because it ain't true. That's just how it is. People may not like to hear that, but it's the truth. All right, moving on.
I think that there's a huge contingency of people that's what their goal is. They want that. I saw another one, use military to repel an invasion. This is an invasion. Yeah, I mean, there it is.
Yes, it
people
is.
Saying good don't understand the slippery slope. I think that it can be very problematic too. I think that you're totally right. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Because if there's enough people that support it, then it happens.
Just to go back to Susie for a second, the fact that he got to this first, and the fact that she is going to have, influence over how the rest of this transition unfolds, whether it's picking attorney general or any of these other high-level positions, I think we ought to all look at this as a wise decision, a good decision, and for everybody out there wanting Trump to pivot or change or somehow whatever you want him to do, he just won a mandate from
Yes, respect rule of law, but that's not what that woman thinks it means. Moving on.
the American people to execute on the program that he laid out in this election. It wasn't particularly close. And I think he ought to put people in place who are going to do it. That's what the
Who
people
will go
are
after
asking
his
for.
enemies? I mean, that's
That's not what he ran on.
Yes, he did.
See, he can't say this, but I think that if you go down and you interview a bunch of Trump voters, I think that they absolutely want Trump to weaponize the government to attack the people that attacked him.
No, not in the way that you're saying. We'll talk about that more in a second.
I think that's exactly what they want him to do. Because that's what people wanted to do to Trump. Do it? Yeah. And so, like, and you can't say this because it sounds bad to say. I think that's what's going to happen.
It did. It is explicit.
All right, dude. So there is, Asmongold thinks well, but there's a nuance he's missing. Right, going after political enemies. Yeah, that comes down to what Beria said to Stalin. You know, show me the man and I'll show you the crime. Right? Stalin wanted somebody gone. Beria would figure out something to trump up, no pun intended, and then kick him out. And then they would erase the photos of that guy later on. That's not what we're talking about here. And it's not what Trump's, that's not what's going on at all. But we'll talk about that more in a second.
That's not what he ran on.
That is explicitly.
That's not what he ran on.
Look at what he said in the past week. He literally said that he was going to exact vengeance.
You still don't understand how you lost. He ran on immigration.
Don't say me. I'm not a Democrat.
He ran on immigration.
It's, you know, like I think that's it. People want catharsis. People want revenge. And I think that people see.
No. People don't want revenge. Well, some people do. But what most of us want is actual rule of law. Right? These people are putting up the smokescreen of, oh, you're going after your political enemies, as though somehow that can insulate their buddies from actual criminal acts that they committed. Right? There's a difference between just putting, the guy who lost in prison and putting somebody who in prison who was on the other side who abused his power and actually committed crimes. And, Asmongold is, good dude, and he's trying to be nuanced about it, but I think he's missing that distinction.
Trump getting convicted of like 34 felonies, and they.
Yeah, let's talk about those felonies here. What were they? Were they actually like abuse of power things, actual stealing things, or were they, paperwork problems that he may or may not have actually had any knowledge of as the CEO? I don't know. I didn't really look into it. And if he actually did something wrong, then he should be accounted for it. But I have a very hard time believing that prosecuting office that happened to drop the charges at the time they did was actually being legit about things.
They think that it's bullshit. And so they're like, okay, everybody's conspiring against this guy. Well,
they may be, they may not be. That's not the point. That's very far from the point, because that's not what people are talking about. That's what these people, some of these paid shills are talking about, but that's not what the people who elected Trump, that's not what they're talking about. Right? So, I guess I'll get into this now. Let's go back to 2016. Right? You remember James Comey's little press conference? and he laid out all the things that Hillary Clinton did, and all the laws she broke, at least, allegedly, that he had said he had evidence for. But he wasn't going to press charges because no reasonable prosecutor would press charges for. Baloney. I was a submarine officer in the United States Navy. I spent 20 years on active duty. I had a top secret SCI clearance. I was read into special access programs. And I can tell you without a doubt, without a shred of doubt at all, if I had done half the things that Comey said that he had evidence that Hillary Clinton did, I would still be in prison. You know what happened the same time as Comey gave that press conference and said, whatever, she's Hillary Clinton? They put a guy in prison for, a year and a half for taking a picture of himself inside the engine room of a submarine. Now, the engine room of a submarine is, by definition, a classified space. It's all everything in there is classified confidential. You can't take pictures in there. But you know what that guy probably took pictures of him? It was him in front of a couple of pipes. Right? Because 99% of that has nothing that's really sensitive in it. Unless he was standing in front of the reactor plant control panel, taking a picture of himself next to some of the temperature gauges, it wouldn't have told anybody anything. And even then, all it would have told them is what temperature the plant was operating at, which you can extrapolate some data from. But it's not really harmful data, really, because it's everything the bad guys already have. And that's why it's only classified as confidential. But that guy got thrown in prison for like a year and a half. His lawyers just say, hey, Hillary did all this stuff. They let her off. You should let him off. And the judge said, nah, that'll go fuck you. Go to prison. And that is bullshit. In 2002, I went to Ireland. I decided I was going to run a marathon, and I probably may only do one marathon. If I was going to do it, I was going to do it with style. So I ran the marathon in Dublin, and my friend who was stationed in Italy came and met me, and we toured around the island and a few other places. We went up to Londonderry in Northern Ireland. If you don't know, Londonderry in the 70s, there was a big protest there and against British rule, and through a number of screwed up chain of command problems, the British police killed a bunch of people there. There's a big fiasco, and they called it Bloody Sunday. U2 did a song about it. But they have a museum up there about it now, and they still have some of the murals that were painted there at the time preserved. And I remember walking past the castle wall there, and painted across it was this saying, when the law breakers are the lawmakers, there is no law. And that is true. It's not about revenge upon political enemies, man. It's about observing for a fact that there is two tiers of justice in this country. If you're on the politically favored, you get a pass. I'm not talking about the rank and file, you and me kind of thing, right? Joe Schmuckatelli. I'm talking about the higher echelons. If you're politically favored, you get a pass on everything. If you're not, well, they'll throw the book at them. And you might say, oh, Kingswood, why are you still mad about Hillary? I'm not. I really don't. It doesn't affect me one way or the other. But it is an anecdote among many anecdotes that have come down over the years that have shown that there is not actually a justice system in this country. Because you can't have a functional justice system when the laws are selectively applied. Right? That's what people were protesting with the Trump thing. And that's what people see when they see the lawfare against Trump, is they see the same thing happening. He's put on trial because of real estate things that everybody else in the real estate world does, and nobody had any problems with until a prosecutor decided to interfere with the election by putting him on trial for that. He's looking at clerical paperwork errors, apparently, that probably everybody else has done at some point. But hey, it's the year before the election. He's our political adversary. Hey, geez, how about that? That's what it's about, dude.
Well, let's get together and we're going to do the same thing back to them. I think.
No, it's not about doing the same thing back to them. It's having the same standard for everybody. There are legitimate criminals in our government who need to be thrown in prison. And they have been operating under the shield because they're for a long time.
That's what happens. And so, instant regret on her part? Yeah, there you go. He was kind once, he got backstabbed, so he ever wants him to take revenge this time? Yeah, I think that's exactly it. Not revenge, retaliation. Yeah, and I think that the problem is that, like, it's still not really acceptable for people to, like, say that, but I actually do think it's a huge reason why a lot of people voted for him.
No. I mean, you could call it that, but that's not what it is. It's about equal treatment under the law and not treating one person differently from another just because they're out of political favor or not. And it's not just Democrat, Republican, right? Because remember what George Carlin said, and he was right. It's a big club and you're not in it. Democrat, Republican Party, they all work for the same boss, and it ain't us. Right? This about the establishment and the zeitgeist of, if you will, of the governmental apparatus, the neoliberal, neocon, whatever you want to call it. You go on against the established order. If you don't fall in line or you're a threat to something, you have to be taken out, right? So, and people, you can say it's revenge, but it's not that, right? It's about equal application of law.
Is they explicitly want him to do that. Can't wait till the poor people in the Midwest suffer from tariffs. It's real catharsism. Reap what you sow. I mean, again, all I'm saying is I think that's what's happening. Isn't that super fucked up? People used to bring their families to watch lynchings. That doesn't matter. Like, people are more than willing to do something that's horrible if they think that they're doing it for the right reason. Like, this is nothing compared to that.
That's true. But it wasn't the lynchings. Lynchings happened at dead of night. They brought their families to watch the hanging in the courthouse square, which is the application of adjudicated justice. Right? That's a good thing. You can argue whether that application of justice is something we want to do anymore, but the application of adjudicated justice is a good thing, and we should bringing your kids to observe it helps to solidify the moral and societal norms that you want to impress on your society in order to maintain a functional society. This isn't, it's pretty normal.
He ran on inflation.
I'm not here paid to represent
one of the many things he ran on in addition to
he ran on the issues that people care about. He ran on the economy.
Nobody's saying that he didn't run on those things, but he also ran on vengeance.
Yes.
He did.
No, he didn't. Again. Well, you could say yes, but not in the way these paid shills want to make it sound. Again, they're saying, well, vengeance your political enemies. That's a spell. It's a verbal spell meant to say that, oh, gosh, anything. If you take any action against somebody who happens to have been opposed to you politically, that you can't do that. That's wrong. Well, maybe that person who is opposed to you politically is an actual criminal. In which case, it would be wrong not to do something to them to bring justice about.
Also run on going after the people who went after him.
And journalists. It was a key feature of all of his speeches.
Yes, Scott, he literally said, I am your retribution, the Biden crime family. Lock her up. Went after Sessions repeatedly for not doing what he wanted.
The Biden crime family is a crime family. It's been well established. Biden bragged about it on video on an international forum about how he had a prosecuting attorney in Ukraine fired because that prosecuting attorney was looking into a company that he didn't like, that he didn't want him looking into. And it turns out his son was on the board of that company, and he was making a whole lot of money from it. Right? Yeah, that is criminal abuse of your political office. Right? And the Clinton crime family, we've already talked about. I just talked about Hillary's thing, and let's not talk about the alleged body count, or the murder of Seth Rich, which we all know now, or we should, if we've been paying any attention, that Seth Rich is the reason why is how Julian Assange got all that stuff from, and he was killed for doing it. I mean, it's not been adjudicated in the court of law, but a number of technical experts have come out and talked about how, no, it couldn't have been a Russian hack. It was downloaded from the system way too fast. And yeah, you never heard of it. There's never been any real adjudication of Seth Rich, but let's be honest, we know what that is. So yeah, these are criminals, and they should be held to account.
Wanted Sessions to do, which was to indict Hillary or whoever he wanted to indict.
I think that if Trump's first candidacy resulted in Hillary Clinton being in jail, there would have been a higher chance that he got reelected.
I'm not convinced. I think his supporters would have loved that. I would have, because of the reasons I stated before, because of my thoughts about equitable justice. But I think if he had tried to do that, well, for one thing, let's face it, the optics of prosecuting a former president's wife, in reality, you're not going to do that. Much as maybe she should have been, but you can't really set that precedence. But I think all of the fiasco of the trumped up jackasseries of the impeachment things and all that stuff, it would have been much worse. If he'd tried to do that, it would have been hell to pay, and it would have not worked out very well for him or anybody else.
I think that's what would... I actually think it would have massively increased it.
Yeah, his supporters would have liked it more, but it would have utterly destroyed his presidency.
Can want his campaign to have been about, tax reform and things like that. That is not what he said on the stump, time after time after
And
time.
also
He talked about going after his enemies.
I'm heartened by the fact that the left still cannot figure
A lot of people that are bringing up the tariffs and everything, I think that a lot of you guys don't understand the fact that the average American doesn't understand what a tariff is or how it works. I think that if you were to ask how many people understand tariffs that are voters, I would say 5% or less.
Yeah, you're probably right about that. I'll tell you what, I understand it. I mean, I'm not an economist. I majored in mechanical engineering, minored in astronomy. I've got an MBA. I'm a trained nuclear engineer for the Navy, and I've read up on this stuff a bit. I just say that because, not necessarily because I'm not dumb. How about that? But I'm interested in financial things. Here's the thing, right? on paper, by the theory of free trade and all that sort of thing, tariffs can be a bad thing. That said, those are based on theoretical posits from 18th century, 19th century, Ricardo and other people. And what has observably occurred through the process of free trade in the last 50 years here in the United States is that unrestricted free trade has hollowed out the economic base of this country, as well as was predictably the case, because economic free trade requires not just transfer of goods, but also transfer of people. And if people are not fungible, right? Different people have different skill sets, what have you. And what has observably happened is that the required infrastructure to maintain anything other than merely a slavish service economy has been exported out of the United States in the last 35, 40 years because of, in fully embracing free trade principles, right? 10 years ago, I was holding people to task on, we've lost our manufacturing base. And I was like, dude, our manufacturing percentage of our GDP is way higher than it ever has been before, which was true. And it's still true now. But that's not the whole story, right? Because it's not just about numbers on paper. It's also about people, right? It does no good to make the overall GDP or whatever go up if the average person on the street is worse off, right? So by financializing everything and exporting manufacturing because of, free trade principles of going to where the cheapest labor pool is, that ends up with all the people that are in the place that things have been exported out from being worse off because they're not, there's not the same level of employability that's before. It's like, learn to code. Okay, not everybody can do that. You can't create a society that is only able to be prosperous for the highly intellectual and have that society function. You have to have a society where there's a bell curve of intellect, right? A dude running around with an IDIQ can't make functional code, but he can sweep the floors. He can, hammer out widgets in a machine. He can do all these things. There's all these things that he can do that can be valuable and make him, a functional and valuable and valued contributor to society, and not have him be A1 destitute and B not feeling like an absolute schlub, right? And if you export all of those things, what's left for those guys, right? It's not just about the raw GDP numbers. Let's not get away from the fact that GDP is highly tweaked and highly massaged at the various economic analysis things, and what's counted and what isn't, and how much of that is government spending and what isn't. From a moral and also helping all your people flourish as best they can given their abilities and limitations standpoint, you don't want to do that. Let alone the national security and other implications of it. If 2020 taught us anything, it should have taught us a couple things. One, the Second Amendment is absolutely indispensable, because what happened in 2020, right? The government let the riots run wild because it was in their interest to do so. Not Trump, but other people in the government. And they weren't going to help you, so you have to help yourself, right? The other thing is, it is folly to export your production capability of things like medicines or what have yous that we had to import from other places. And then 2020 came along, we couldn't get them because we didn't have them because, oh my God, the international trade is kind of shut down. Oh my gosh, we're running scarce on things. Well, no wonder why. You exported all the production, right? I mean, it's not just about the raw economic numbers. And, so Asmongold, you're right, by a strictly numerical standpoint, but that's not the whole story.
Yeah, probably about 5% or less. So that wasn't really the reason. Less than 1%? Yeah, I mean, it's definitely pretty bad. But I think that's really what's happening here.
Just take the January 6th part of it. He made that a big part of his campaign, that he would, if he were in power, pardon those people. You can't say that that was not on the agenda. It absolutely was.
What was the campaign about? Why did...
Because this is the way that I think a lot of conservatives see it, is that they see, like, for example, like all of like the BLM riots from back then, and then they saw that a lot of those people seemingly didn't get in trouble, and they weren't dealt with in the way that I think a lot of people wanted them to be dealt with. And I think that now they look at January 6th as like, okay, well, this was our bad thing that we did, but we're getting punished and you're not. So that's why people support letting the January 6 people go.
Yes, but it's more than that, buddy. It's not that people think that the BLM riders didn't get treated the way we think they should have been treated. It's that they didn't get treated the way they should have been treated, no matter what anybody thinks. Right? You look at Seattle and the other places, most of them were arrested, and later on this video he's going to talk about a whole bunch of people were arrested, and some people were charged. That's true, but most of them were arrested and let loose the next day, and nothing happened, right? Because it served the establishment's purpose to have those riots go on, right? It was the political will. Let's be honest. The George Floyd thing and the BLM thing was completely fabricated. George Floyd wasn't. That happened. But I remember watching the live stream videos and seeing those guys running down the streets in New York and other places and finding pallets of bricks just happening to be sitting there. And they somehow knew how to take down the things around the pallets and opening them up and then distribute them, right? That was planned. It wasn't just some spontaneous thing, right? I mean, you can discount that if you want to, but go back. It shouldn't be hard to find the live stream videos from back in the day. That was on the table. They didn't plan for Chauvin to do what he did. I mean, there's probably a contingency plan ready for something to happen. But it wasn't a spontaneous kind of, oh my gosh, everything's going to happen across the country and all this damage is going to happen all at once. No, that was an operation that was intentional, right? But even if that wasn't the case, everybody, there were people who firebombed police cars, who were lawyers, who had nothing happen to them, and other things happened to. It was, again, selective enforcement of justice, which means it's not justice.
It's simple tribalism.
No, it's not.
That's it. That's the reason. Because, I don't think they should be let go. Absolutely not. But you can see very easily how a person comes to that conclusion. It's obvious.
No, it's not. And we'll talk about why in just a second.
Okay, but do you think that he's going to do those other things when it comes to the Department of Justice?
I don't know what he's going to do. I'm not.
A big part of the campaign was being a victim. That was a big part of it. Was his victimhood. Yeah. They're coming for you, but they're going to have to get through me. That was his whole line.
Because that's obviously how it happened. But anyway.
That is all about the enemies list. That is all.
She's exactly right.
No, she's not. Not in the way she's saying. Not in the way she's saying. It's not a victims list. Right? No, that's not what it is at all. We can see what has been done, not just to him, but other people that the establishment doesn't agree with. And it's obvious there's two tiers of justice.
She's completely right. He's going to play it down, but they're right. The problem is that everybody knows that and they voted for it.
Everybody does know that and they voted for it, but it's not the way that Asmongold thinks it is.
I disagree.
The deep state. This is the stuff that he talked about.
The deep state is a real thing, and anyone who tries to disclaim it is a shill. Look, it's not some grand conspiracy. It's the entrenched bureaucracy and the systems and processes that have been set up, and the echelons of command and control. It's Jerry Pournelle of science fiction writing fame had his iron laws of bureaucracy, right? Initially, a bureaucracy is set up to achieve a certain goal, right? But over time, as new people come into the bureaucracy, the goals of the bureaucracy shift from being not to achieve the goal that the bureaucracy was set up to achieve, but to maintain the continuity of the bureaucratic system. It's not this, well, it's not this grand cabal. I mean, there are some higher echelon people who are applauding, obviously, but it's all about the system, right? The system and the players in the system who resist change of the system because it impacts their power, but also their identity as who they are and what they are and what they're trying to achieve. It's a twisting of the goal that the process was set up for. That's what the deep state is. And it's not a conspiracy theory. In fact, anybody who says conspiracy theory at this point, unironically, you need to dismiss as a retard, because if we learned anything, is that everything that the powers that be say is a conspiracy theory ends up being true. Right? I was one of those guys who was like, whatever. And then I started observing, holy cow, everything they said is conspiracy theory ends up being true. Whether it be, they've even come up and admitted aliens. And then there's the stupidest thing that I ever heard of was this stupid thing called the whole chemtrail thing. It was the stupidest thing I ever heard of. Oh, they're spraying stuff in the air and they're trying to poison us. Like, get the frick out of here, you frickin' moron. And now they're admitting it's true. Geoengineering stuff, they're spraying stuff in there to stop the sun's rays or whatever. European Union nations have admitted to it. The U.S. government's admitted to it. So the only conspiracy theory that hasn't ended up being true is the one that says that Hillary Clinton is a lizard person. And I'm not entirely convinced that that's not entirely accurate. Anyway.
On the stump. Unless you just don't want to listen to him. Those are his own words.
I listen plenty.
If you believe that people who violated the Capitol on January 6th committed a crime, which I would hope you would because they weren't invited in the...
Yes, they were. I was working at home at the time. So I had my business laptop here. And I had my personal computer here. I had Twitter up as I was working. And I saw something going on. And I turned and I looked at it. And there's a couple live streams going on. Something's going on at the Capitol. I turned it on. I watched on live stream as the Capitol Hill police pulled aside the Jersey barriers. I watched on live stream as the Capitol Hill police opened up the doors and waved everybody in. I watched on live stream as the Capitol Hill police escorted everyone through there, smoking and joking with them, taking selfies, and all that stuff. Later, I watched a different video as the Capitol Hill Police was standing next to Ashley Babbitt, not doing anything as she was pounding on a door, and then one of their buddies came around the corner, shot her, and left while the two Capitol Hill Police Department people who were right next to her had no problem with what she was doing. That was murder. You cannot use deadly force, except in self-defense, defense of others, when deadly force is already being applied against one of those cases, or to prevent a forcible felony, right? You cannot do it. She was not doing any of those things. That was murder. And the two police officers right next to her had no issue with what she was doing. Otherwise, they would have stopped her before their buddy shot him. She died that day. 2 other Capitol Hill police people were suicided within the next 2 weeks. Those people were invited into the Capitol by their government in the form of the Capitol Hill Police. And then the Capitol Hill Police shot them, and then the federal government imprisoned them. Some of them were in solitary confinement for almost a year before any charges were brought. Some of them are still in prison, some of them without charges being brought. And at the most, those who are still in prison should have been released a long time ago because it's just a simple trespass. No, they committed no crime. The federal government set them up. At first, I thought that this was a Trump thing because, the police are letting him in. This is Trump doing a thing to influence things. And then I watched how the Republicans reacted to it later, and I was like, what the hell is going on here? And then I learned the fact that the Capitol Hill Police Department does not answer to the president. Do you know who is in charge of the Capitol Hill Police Department? The Speaker of the House. Who was the Speaker of the House? Nancy Pelosi. January 6th was a put-up job. And we now know that FBI agents were inside the Capitol already in MAGA gear when they showed up, and there was all kinds of FBI agents and informers in the crowd. So no, they weren't criminals. It was a put-up job designed to try to completely ensure that Trump could never come back into power again, right? And to encapsulate their control. So no, they did nothing wrong. You don't believe me? The videos are still out there of what happened. It was 100% a put-up job. This woman's lying. She probably doesn't know she's lying, but she is.
The way they claimed they were, right? They were not there. They didn't go through security the way the rest of us.
Yeah, the cops escorted them in.
They were prosecuted. They were convicted. And now they're serving jail.
No, some of them haven't been prosecuted yet. Some of them are still languishing without charges.
He is going to spring them, right?
Yeah, of course.
What does that tell you about how he's going to weaponize the Justice Department?
As well, he should spring them because they are political prisoners. They are not in prison because of actual crimes they committed. They're in prison for political reasons. They should be sprung. And the people who were involved in that operation, those guys should be in prison.
Department, and on whose behalf? On behalf of people who committed crimes for him. For him, not for anybody else.
Exactly. That's why he's going to spring them. It's because they're on his side.
No, dude. It's because they were railroaded.
I think that a very big problem that a lot of the media has is that the media relies on optics in order to push people to opinions that they don't actually have. And the big issue is that the average person might not say this, but the average person thinks it. And that's why you see a lot of dissonance whenever you look at polls versus actual voting behavior. It's because people say things that sound good, but then they actually go to vote, and then they vote for something that's a lot worse. That's society? Yeah. Because polls aren't random? Yeah. Mainstream media tells you who you should be mad at? Well, I'm just saying, what Democrats have weaponized justice system for years. It's time for them to play defense. Well, your comment here, by the way, weaponizing the justice system is bad, right? It's bad whoever's doing it.
What do you mean by that? If you mean the Berea style, show me the man and I'll show you the crime, absolutely, that's bad. If you mean looking for actual crimes that may have been committed by your political opponents, actual abuses of power, like, let's say, I don't know, putting FBI agents on the staff of Twitter and Facebook and other places with the intent of providing government directives of who to silence and who not to, which we all know from the Twitter files is what actually happened. Okay, well then that is a crime that should be prosecuted. Looking at it from the Trump perspective, what if there was evidence that they really did have 18 instances where FBI agents and U.S. attorneys lied on affidavits to the FISA court in order to get warrants to surveil his campaign? If there is evidence for that, everybody involved in that should be in prison. And it's not political revenge. It's not because, oh, they did it to me, so I'm doing it to them. It's because that's the rule of law. Not rule of law like these paid shills, these media whores. Not whore from a sexual sense, but they're bought and paid for to shill for their purpose. Not the spinning, oh, it's no, rule of law, which only means rule by lawyers in order to get their team to do the things that they want to do. No, actual rule of law, meaning the law is applied equal to all, and abuses of power cannot be allowed to stand. If that's what we're going for, then all that needs to be prosecuted. And you can't say it's going against your political enemies just because the criminals happen to be your political enemies. If they're committing actual crimes, which there is good reason to think they actually did, then that should happen.
However, this is what people think, and that's what they're voting on. That's the reason. And so I actually think it is that simple in a lot of cases. So getting inside a building illegally is worthy of jail, but getting inside a country is not. I mean, I'm not making this argument. I'm not saying that. I mean, you want to argue with them, go ahead. But like, I'm saying that I think that there's a lot of like unspoken truth and unspoken reality that mainstream media and a lot of people, even on the internet, are unwilling to approach. And I think that also people think that simply repudiating it and saying that it's bad or that it's evil is enough to just make it stop happening. I don't think that's the case, and I think that it's very obvious that's not the case. So the problem is that people like, and this is the issue, is that media is built around optics. It's not built around reality, and it's not really built around policy.
Well, that's true. They spin their spells all the time in order to get the policies they want in place. But okay, yeah.
I think that if you were to poll a lot of average, like if you were to look at the amount of Trump voters that there were, and you were to ask them, would you be okay with mass deportations, even deporting children that have been born here that have birthright citizenship? I think that you would get a supermajority of yeses.
Fucking A right. Yeah, if you came here illegally, you're not an immigrant, you're an invader. And you know what? Those kids who have birthright citizenship, that is stolen property. Citizenship in the United States is a material good that those parents stole on behalf of their kids. Those kids cannot be allowed to benefit from stolen property. Any more than Bernie Madoff's kids could have been allowed to keep the millions of dollars that he embezzled through the stock market back in the day, or anything else. It's stolen property. You don't get to keep it. It's stolen. You have to give it back, and you have to go back.
If you could read their minds, they might not say it publicly, but if you could read their minds, I think you would get a lot of yeses.
I admire your, I don't know if I want to call it naivete or optimism that Trump is going to run on the policies you care about deregulation and tax cuts and whatnot. That's just not what his campaign was about.
Well,
That's not
I
what he
think-
has
I think-
indicated.
with all due
do.
respect, I've run more campaigns than you, and I know what campaigns are about, and I know why people walk into voting booths.
Why
and you're
people
totally
walk into
wrong.
why people
We
walk
gotta
into
go,
voting
guys.
booths and what Trump plans to do when handed the presidency are two different things.
Yep, there it is. And so people are getting real mad about this. That's what his campaign was about. Yeah. And according to CNN, they're brainwashed because they don't understand what they want. What was it about then? And bad argument, but he's not wrong. Americans are afraid to say that they want a dictator president as either liberal or Republican, since both parties only care about their side winning instead of policies.
No. It depends on the American. That said, I think the people who voted for Trump care about the country, or at least I'm projecting myself and everybody else, but care about the country and love the Constitution and want to see that actual rule of law take place. Not going to lie, though, a benevolent dictator who actually loved the country would be far better than the utterly corrupt and incurably evil cesspool of filth that we have ruling us now. Now, I don't want that. I want to have a republic. And, I want the rule of law. That said, at some point, you got to do what you got to do. But in reality, no. Don't want a dictator. Though we do want justice equally applied. And we do want citizens to be the first thing on our leaders' minds and our benefit. Not, how can we benefit some foreign power? Or how can we, line our own pockets or what have you? And not how can we turn a blind eye to the crimes of our friends while we invent crimes that our enemies committed. That's not what we want, right? Dictatorship is better than utter corruption, but it's still not good. So no, Trump voters don't want a dictator. They want rule by the Constitution and actual rule of law, not a facade of rule by law, meaning rule by lawyers in order to do some kind of word wizardry to make it find some, clever sweep of the tongue to set aside the actual law and the Constitution in order to get done what you want to have done. It's two different things there.
Yeah, I think exactly. And he's still in campaign mode. Yeah. And she's obviously unhinged. I think the problem is that the big issue is that, like, a lot of conversations about this are built around, like, kind of how it sounds to say a certain thing in a certain way. But I don't think that average people care about that optics as much as I would say, like, media does. Yeah, and I think that, like, this sentiment here is exactly why people don't care about January 6th. It's because they're also disingenuous. They're crying about January 6ers going free. When they set 2020 rioters free, January 6ers didn't burn entire cities to the ground. And the truth is that no matter what you think about this statement, whether you think this is a true statement or not, this is an opinion that is shared by enough people that it can shift the election. And if enough of those people get together, this opinion becomes the rule.
Well, it's also true, buddy. It's also true. Again, January 6ers were invited into the Capitol by their government in the form of the Capitol Hill Police. But you could say, the 2020 rioters were allowed to do it and encouraged by the government, who didn't do anything to stop them and, in fact, went on the airwaves to encourage them. And, okay, that's true. In fact, it's very much true. But what was the purpose of each? The January 6th people were there to protest against what they saw was an injustice and a fraudulent application of election law, and an appeal to stop it, to let to have an investigation take place. The 2020 rioters were going on government, approval to burn the place to the ground in order to generate chaos, I think, in order to set up the conditions for the electoral results that the government people wanted in the fall. But, good luck proving that. Point is, yeah.
And that's it. And so the problem is that a lot of people think that they think that they can like kind of bully people out of like these types of opinions. It isn't an opinion, it's a fact. I don't think it's that simple. Just for the record, I don't think this is a good faith evaluation. However, that being said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because if other people think that, then that's all there is to it. How much damage does the riot cause? Why? Why do I think it's not a good faith evaluation? Because tons of people got arrested in the riots.
Yeah, and they were set free the next day.
Like literally hundreds, if not thousands of people got arrested in the riots.
And set free the next day.
Some of them went free, some of them didn't go free. A lot of them were charged with crimes and they did get in trouble.
What percentage of the rioters were charged compared to the in 2020 rioters got charged compared to the percentage of people who were invited into the Capitol on January 6th got charged? There's a vast difference there, my friend. A vast difference.
Tons? Yeah, I guarantee you. Like, the riots were massive. Of course they arrested tons of people. And it's the same as also not every single person in January 6th got arrested either. That's really the difference. Most went free. Yeah, I bet probably a lot of the people from January 6th went free too. Like, that's... They got bailed out? Yeah, I mean, is this not true? No shit? Yeah. Yeah, I'm very confused. January 6th only if you went in the Capitol? Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But that was the point.
I'm very confused here. 14,000 people got arrested during BLM? Yeah, that's a lot of people.
Yeah. And most of them got released the next day without charge.
This chat's so lost. The problem is that I think people are so ideologically captured by certain points of view that they're unwilling to cede any ground or to look at anything that doesn't completely agree with them as being legitimate at all.
This is true. But this is true. But it's not. I think he's taking that too far. He's trying to nuance things that don't need to be nuanced. And then on the other hand, applying nuance inappropriately. Yeah, there's plenty of people who have ideological views and I can be swayed from. And then there are people who honestly, think things through. Once upon a time, I got fooled by all the neocon bullshit, post 9/11. I was active duty then, rah, rah, rah. I was able to evaluate the results of all of that neocon bullshit and realize, wow, it was neocon bullshit. And I've turned the table on that. Not tooting my own horn here. I kind of am, but not tooting my own horn here. But I mean, not everybody is able or willing to do that. In that ideologically, I mean, but I don't think that principle that he's talking about applies to this set of thoughts and events for the reasons I've spelled out before.
And I think this is like this radicalization has happened and it's gotten worse and worse and worse. Chat's past cooked. Yeah, it is. And I don't really have a problem with this, guys. Again, people can disagree all you want. Like if you're insulting or hostile or rude, then you'll get banned. But if you just want to voice disagreement, then that's fine. The point is that I think a lot of people have become so radicalized by this that anything that they hear that is even 1% off of what they believe to be true, they just lose their minds. They, like, even, and this happens with left-wing people too, right? Like, for example, if you're pro-trans, but you don't think that, trans women should compete against biological women, you're seen as a transphobe. You can be pro-trans, but if you don't think that, trans women should use women's bathrooms, you're like a TERF, right? That's what happened to J.K. Rowling. So the problem is that there are like these infinite purity tests. Zach, you've created an echo chamber. How?
I agree completely. Purity spirals are retarded, right? It's not about maintaining ideological purity. It's about what is true and what is right. As a Christian, I have to be, I don't have to be, but I choose to be bound by that which is true, that which corresponds with reality. And as Christian, I think that reality has divine nature, that, we're not going to go into proselytism here. But yeah, he's right. There are people who are so entrenched in their ideological views that they will not look at differences of opinion, and they will not look at evidence that says maybe they're wrong. And that's all true. But frankly, I think Asmongold here is applying that principle, trying to apply that principle so much that he's not fully analyzing what's actually happening. He's assuming that there is a level of, I'm not going to say intellectual dishonesty, but a level of intellectual blindness that's happening that I'm not sure is the case. That I'm pretty sure is not the case. Now, obviously, there are going to be many people who are not as smart as me, but you know what I mean. That obviously there can be people who who are reacting the way he said, it's just my team, and therefore crush the other team. But I really don't think that's the core. That's the core of the people who are on Trump's side. I really don't think so, because I've listened to a bunch of them. I am one of them, but I listened to a bunch of others of them, and I'll tell you what, I think there's a lot more open-mindedness on the Trump team side than on the other team side. And again, I don't think it's just about revenge, man. I swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution, even though I'm stuck here in California, which uses the Constitution as toilet paper. I still believe in that, which is why I am all for him going after the criminals who have been abusing their governmental power to do unconstitutional things, like suppressing free speech through their contacts and influence with social media, like apparently or allegedly lying on affidavits to FISA courts and other things like that. That is not persecution of political enemies. That is pursuing equal justice under the law and the rule of law.
How could it be possible that I created an echo chamber when we're talking about everybody in chat disagreeing? Has it ever occurred to you that maybe that's illogical? Yeah. Somebody says that I don't really know what I'm talking about. Let me go ahead and look at this. So what do you think that I don't know about this? It's an echo chamber because I disagree with you? You don't really disagree? We know where you stand? Yeah. So what is this exactly?
All right. I remember the rest of this. It's I think we got as far as this in his video as I need to talk about what I wanted to talk about. And, there's other things, but this is the core of what I wanted to discuss. And apologies to Asmongold for cutting him short here. Hopefully he won't object. He'll probably never see this. But I really do think he's off base here. I think there's a more fundamental moral analysis going on than the mere tribal and mere revenge-oriented assumptions that he's applying. It is not always bad to go after someone who happens to be your political enemy, if they've done something wrong. And I know what you're saying. Hey, shipmate, back in the day you were talking about Hillary's thing with the classified thing. Didn't Trump do the same thing with his classified documents thing that they went after? Well, I don't know, but I'll tell you what. I do know how classification works. Like I said, I had a TSSCI clearance and I was read into special access programs. So the classification was established by the National Security Act, which empowers the president to, hold things secret. Every thing that dictates what is classified and how to market and how to store it and all that stuff is put in place by a presidential executive order. The president, therefore, is the ultimate classification authority. When my last deployment in the Navy, I went to the Philippines, worked with the Special Forces dudes, and I remember I was sitting I was getting in briefed at Special Operations Command Pacific, and I was talking to this guy was briefing us about some intelligence thing, and he was really mad at Obama because Obama had in a press conference talked about some stuff that was classified. He was like, "He can't do that. How dare he do that?" And I was like, "Hey, dude, hey buddy, he's the president. He can do that." "No, he can't." And we didn't push it because it wasn't the point, but he can. The president dictates, can decide what is and is not classified and what can and cannot be released by law and by nature of the fact that the procedures for classification were established by him. Vice president can't do that. Secretary of State can't do that. The president can. Now, do I think that I don't know what the whole classified documents thing at Mar-a-Lago was. I don't know the details. But I am 100% sure that every ex-president in existence has a similar thing going on in his house that he's never been bothered for. And I do know that Mr. Biden, as the vice president, has no authority on classification ever, and he certainly can't leave things in his garage like he apparently did. And Hillary Clinton, as merely the Secretary of State, definitely couldn't set up a server in her bathroom where she stored SCI material that was apparently accessed by the Chinese, amongst other things, without any security at all. Again, if Mr. Trump did something actually wrong, well, throw the book at him. But throw the book at everybody else, too. Not selective enforcement. Right? Rule of law means the rule applies to everybody, not just those who are in political favor and who are not. Right? It also means that we have to be honest about things. And sending, wizard word spells about, oh my gosh, my political enemies. Well, what exactly is going on and what do those supposed political enemies do? Right? It's not just about revenge. And Asmongold, you'll probably never see this. Some in that nothing. We got 200 something subscribers. You probably never know this happened. But I think you got this one wrong, man. I think you're trying to be entirely too. I think you're sitting the fence on this one too much. I get it. You're both sides of the story and trying to see nuance, and there is nuance, but I think you're missing the most important nuances in there. Anyway, that's it. I just wanted to vent a bit. Take it for what it is. Like I said, I'm a fiction writer. I write fiction for fun and profit. And the purpose of this channel is to have people get to know me, so maybe they'll go buy books. So if you have an inkling, go by michaelkingswood.com and pick up a book or two. Otherwise, come back here again and we'll talk later. I'm out. See you next time. Until then, don't do anything I wouldn't do.